On the 27th of February 1973, 25-year-old Joanne Burma of Colfax disappeared in Nevada City, California, while attempting to hike 3 miles through snow to her boyfriend's cabin. She was initially dropped off by another friend named Ron Inman before starting the arduous trek to see Robert Brownlee. She was mindful of how treacherous the task was ahead, so she left her 3-year-old in Ron's care. It wasn't until the 8th of March 1973 that Rob reported her missing, and she failed to contact him in regards to her baby. Almost a fortnight after she was last seen, a search for Joanne was launched, but hampered due to heavy snow, and they had to wait until it melted. The area was a former mining town and was quite rugged. An extensive search was completed, though it failed to turn up any significant clues, with the exception of a comb of hers that was found. Brownlee and Joanne had frequently fought. Brownlee, however, denied ever arguing with Joanne, telling detectives they had a very fine relationship, but admitted to assaulting her once. Brownlee said she visited him on the 14th of February and left the next day. He drove to Colfax on the 24th of February to bring her snowshoes and invited her back to come out on the 27th of February. That visit was confirmed by other witnesses. Detectives were suspicious and searched Brownlee's cabin, but found nothing. In May of 1973, Brownlee was given a polygraph test, which he passed. Joan also went by the name of Joanne Dolly Norman. At the time of her disappearance, she was 135 pounds and 5'3", with blonde hair and blue eyes. She also wore glasses. She was last seen wearing a navy blue watch cap, 2 layers of clothes, black boots, and snowshoes at the time of her disappearance. She also had a backpack. A private investigator was hired by Joanne's mother, Ruth Stroll. However, after a considerable time investigating the case, the detective concluded in September of 1973 that she was alive and had taken off at the time, and the case grew cold. In May of 1993, a man named Chuck Miller was driving down a dirt road for firewood, not far from the site of Burma's disappearance. He saw something that caught his eye, what turned out to be a top of a skull, poking out of some banked up dirt. Miller put the skull fragment in his glove compartment and forgot about it for a while, then showed it to his wife, who was a nurse. She encouraged him to turn it into the sheriff's office. They thought it may have been from an old grave. Miller stated that he didn't think too much of it and had long since forgotten about it. It was forwarded to the Human Identification Laboratory at California State University on the 30th of May 1993. An analysis suggested it belonged to that of a young or middle-aged white female, but that was before DNA testing was widely available. The fragment languished in storage. In 2003, a retired cold case investigator for the Sheriff's Department collected DNA samples from Burma's relatives and uploaded the profiles to the FBI database. No matches were found, and it wasn't until 2017 that the department learned that the skull cap had never been submitted for DNA testing. In September of 2019, Burma's skull cap was matched with her relatives' profiles, providing some closure to the 46-year mystery. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to her on the day she vanished. It was theorised that she met with foul play at the hands of someone she knew, possibly her boyfriend. Another theory was that she became lost or injured during a trek to the cabin and perished in the elements of the storm. Although the cause of her disappearance hasn't been verified, at least the family now has closure with the news of verifying the remains to be that of Joanne Burma. On the 7th of August 1969, the decomposing body of an unknown man was discovered partially submerged in a water-filled pit. The roadwork crew located the gruesome find along the northbound side of Interstate 93, just south of Exit 2 in Salem, New Hampshire. It was thought to have been sitting there for about a week. He was discovered laying face up, wearing a tan t-shirt with blue stripes with the Bradley Superstore tag on the front. He was wearing bluish-green slacks, black shoes and socks. However, there were no personal effects found with the remains. An autopsy revealed the man was between 28 to 40 years of age, 5 feet and 11 inches tall, and weighed approximately 225 pounds. He had wide shoulders and was slightly hunched over in appearance. His upper and lower jaws were disproportionate, resulting in a substantial underbite and seemingly oversized lower jaw with buck teeth. There was also a severe break to the right upper thigh bone that had been repaired with a surgical plate and 6 screws. He had been shot twice in the head, as well as in the torso and neck, and the matter was ruled a homicide. The police fingerprinted the victim at the time of the autopsy, and there were no state or national databases into which that information could be input to compare fingerprints. Any manual searches in New Hampshire and in Boston were also unsuccessful, and the remains were buried at the Pine Grove Cemetery in Salem. In 2012, the Cold Case Unit requested that the remains be unearthed. It was then that the State Police Lab received the fingers from the Medical Examiner's Office. In January of 2013, the laboratory tried processing one of the fingers to try and obtain a usable fingerprint. In 2019, Forensic Officer Tim Jackson tried rerunning the fingerprints taken in 2012, but could not find a match. He was hopeful last year as he ran the one usable fingerprint that had been obtained through various databases that upgraded computers and algorithms would lead to better results, but he got nothing. The system wasn't responding because the finger in question was missing the top layer of skin because of the deterioration of it being in the ground since 1969, so he began looking at the dermal layer of skin beneath the epidermis. Fingerprints look a little different in the dermal layer. There are actually 2 rows of ridges that ultimately grow out to one on the top level, said Mr. Jackson. He explained that he didn't think the instrument he was using was seeing the ridge detail the way that it normally does, because he was dealing with the dermal layer of skin, but he knew a way around the problem. He was nearing his retirement. He decided to employ old school methods and plotted the individual characteristics instead. He then ran the fingerprint through the computer again, this time using only the FBI database. He saw a possible match. He called 2 other examiners over to have a look at it, and they all came to the same conclusion. The victim's left middle finger was identified to be that of Winston Morris of Barre, Vermont. He was also known as Skip and was 30 years of age at the time he was shot. Mr. Jackson worked at the Army Crime Lab as a fingerprint examiner for a decade before joining the state police. He credited upgrades of technology with helping him find the match. He didn't feel that the system's algorithms were powerful enough in 2012 to pick it up back then when the lab tried to identify the remains. Skip was released from prison on the 9th of May 1969, just 3 months prior to his body being found. He was last seen alive in Burlington, Vermont on the 25th of July 1969. Scant details are known of his movements before being shot. Officials notified Morris's family of the identification of his remains. The family told investigators that they had contacted Unsolved Mysteries and law enforcement agencies over the years, but to no avail. The authorities have now turned their attention to finding out who shot Mr. Morris and the circumstances surrounding it. William Earl Mould was a 40-year-old man that mysteriously disappeared on the 7th of November 1997. That night, the mortgage broker was enjoying a few drinks at a local nightclub in Latana, Florida. During his time there, he mostly kept to himself before leaving at 11 o'clock at night. He wasn't a big drinker and didn't appear to be drunk when he left the club. The sandy-haired man had a quiet personality and went by the name Bill. He contacted his girlfriend as he departed, telling her that he'll be home soon before getting into his car. He was never heard from or seen again, and the case went cold. Along with his white Saturn SL vehicle, he remained missing for almost 2 decades, with no explanation or leads to investigate what could have possibly happened to him. That was until the property surveyor Jerry Nyman from the Florida town happened to stumble across Google Maps satellite image of his neighbourhood on his computer. He noticed a yellow tinge in the pond of a rear of a property and thought it may have looked like a car, but the images were quite grainy. He showed his co-workers and they thought that he was crazy, saying that's not a car. He went back over the images over a 4-year span and he could still see the image there. That's when he took some screenshots and sent them to his ex-girlfriend, asking her if she thought it could be a car. She in turn sent them to her neighbour Barry Fay, who appeared to have the car positioned behind his property. Fay looked into the water behind his house, but couldn't see anything from the shore. He then got a drone to fly over the property and confirmed that it was a car. The sighting was reported to the Beach County Sheriff's Office on the 28th of August 2019. The missing persons case of William Moult was solved when the heavily calcified car was lifted out of the pond. It was confirmed to be the 1994 Saturn SL that belonged to him, and his skeletal remains were discovered inside the vehicle. Construction works were going on at the property at the time of his disappearance. The car had been visible on Google Earth since 2007, but nobody had noticed until now. If the car had been a colour other than white, it may have never been picked up.